In the dimly lit chamber of the imperial palace in Chang'an, Cao Guiwei meticulously arranged the scrolls on his desk. The year was 626 CE, and as the senior advisor to Emperor Li Yuan, founder of the Tang dynasty, Cao understood the precarious nature of power better than most. He carefully selected a bamboo scroll containing military tactics employed by Sun Tzu centuries earlier. "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting," Cao whispered to his apprentice. "But the supreme art of governance is to rule without the people feeling ruled." What Cao Guiwei understood, what all effective royal advisors throughout history comprehended, was that leadership was not merely about issuing commands, but about creating systems that functioned so smoothly that citizens rarely questioned them. The most successful empires thrived not through constant displays of force, but through carefully orchestrated power dynamics that made their rule seem inevitable, natural, and beneficial. The ancient world's most effective leaders and their advisors developed sophisticated methods of statecraft that modern politicians and executives still employ, often unknowingly. These techniques were rarely documented explicitly, as they constituted the private knowledge of the ruling elite, information they did not want broadly disseminated. Consider the Achaemenid Persian Empire under Darius I, who ruled from 522 to 486 BCE. After seizing power following a period of instability, Darius established one of the ancient world's most effective administrative systems. Rather than ruling through brute force, he implemented a provincial government where satraps, governors, managed local affairs while remaining accountable to the central authority. What made this system remarkable was not its structure alone, but how Darius maintained control. He established an intelligence network so effective that royal officials were called the eyes and ears of the king. These agents traveled throughout the empire, appearing unexpectedly to inspect provincial administration. This created a psychological environment where officials never knew when they were being observed, leading them to govern as if they were always being watched, a precursor to modern surveillance states and corporate oversight systems. Darius also understood the power of infrastructure as a control mechanism. The Royal Road, stretching approximately 1,677 miles from Sardis to Susa, was not merely a transportation route but a political tool. Messages could travel this distance in just 7 days through a relay system of couriers, allowing Darius to maintain tight control over far-flung territories. This communication network functioned as the nervous system of empire, allowing rapid response to threats and creating the impression of omnipresence. Power, Cao Guiwei explained to his apprentice, is magnified through the illusion of omniscience. The emperor need not see everything, but subjects must believe he does. This principle was evident in the Byzantine Empire during the reign of Justinian I, 527 to 565 CE. His advisor and legal expert Tribonian helped codify Roman law into what became known as the Corpus Juris Civilis, a comprehensive legal framework that standardized justice throughout the empire. While presented as a rational and fair system, this codification served a dual purpose. It extended imperial authority into daily life while making that authority appear objective and natural rather than arbitrary. Justinian's wife, Empress Theodora, recognized another psychological dimension of leadership that many rulers missed. During the Nika riots of 532 CE, when rioters threatened to depose Justinian, it was Theodora who delivered the famous words that changed history: "Purple makes a fine shroud." This statement, suggesting it was better to die as emperor than live as a commoner, stiffened Justinian's resolve. He ordered his general Belisarius to suppress the riots, resulting in approximately 30,000 deaths and the preservation of his rule. What Theodora understood was that perception management was crucial to maintaining authority. The calculated public display of resolve prevented future challenges to imperial power. Citizens witnessed the consequences of rebellion and internalized the lesson. In China, the Han Dynasty, 202 BCE, 220 CE, elevated perception management to new heights. Emperor Wu, ruling 141 to 87 BCE, adopted the teachings of Confucianism as state doctrine, despite previously favoring legalism. This seemingly philosophical choice was deeply pragmatic. Confucianism emphasized hierarchical relationships and filial piety, which reinforced imperial authority by positioning the emperor as the father of the nation. The greatest feat of governance, Cao Guiwei noted, is to have the people govern themselves through beliefs that serve the state. This technique of using cultural and religious frameworks to buttress political authority appeared across civilizations. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs were not merely rulers but divine incarnations. The entire religious system reinforced their position, with monumental architecture serving as physical reminders of pharaonic power. The temples and pyramids were not merely religious sites or tombs but psychological tools that inspired awe and submission. Emperor Augustus of Rome, ruling 27 BCE or 14 CE, mastered this approach. After the assassination of Julius Caesar and the subsequent civil wars, Augustus understood that naked power would provoke resistance. Instead, he created what historians call the Principate, a system where he maintained actual control while preserving the facade of republican institutions. He refused the title of king, preferring princeps, first citizen, and Augustus, revered one. He maintained the Senate and other republican institutions while systematically stripping them of real authority. "I found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble," Augustus famously declared. This statement reveals another leadership secret: associating the ruler with visible improvements to daily life creates goodwill that can be leveraged for political purposes. Augustus initiated extensive building programs, expanded the empire, secured its borders, and created systems for grain distribution to the Roman poor, all while gradually consolidating power. The Roman technique of bread and circuses, panem et circenses, as satirized by the poet Juvenal around 100 CE, represented a cynical understanding of population management. By providing basic sustenance and entertainment, Roman leaders distracted citizens from their lack of political power. This technique remains visible today in consumer societies where material comfort often coincides with political disengagement. In the Eastern Mediterranean, the Ptolemaic dynasty that ruled Egypt after Alexander the Great's death employed a different approach to maintaining power. As ethnic Greeks ruling an Egyptian population, they faced potential legitimacy challenges. Their solution was cultural appropriation and synthesis. Ptolemaic rulers adopted Egyptian religious practices, portrayed themselves as pharaohs in Egyptian contexts, while maintaining Greek identity in other settings. Cleopatra VII, ruling 51 to 30 BCE, the dynasty's last ruler, was the first Ptolemy to learn the Egyptian language, demonstrating the political value of cultural adaptation. This technique of adopting local customs while maintaining control remained a staple of imperial governance for centuries, appearing later in the British Empire's policy of indirect rule. The wise ruler, Cao Guiwei observed, makes concessions in form while maintaining control in substance. The Sasanian Empire of Persia, 224 to 651 CE, demonstrated another leadership technique: institutional balancing. Sasanian kings maintained multiple power centers: the Zoroastrian priesthood, the military aristocracy, the bureaucracy, and played them against each other. This prevented any single group from becoming too powerful while positioning the monarch as the ultimate arbiter. King Khosrow I, ruled 531 to 579 CE, was particularly adept at this balancing act. He implemented tax reforms, reorganized the military, patronized scholars and artists, and strengthened central authority, all while appearing to respect traditional power structures. His administrative innovations allowed the empire to mobilize resources efficiently while preventing local power brokers from challenging his authority. This technique of institutional balancing appears across successful governance systems. The Byzantine Empire's famed divide and rule approach extended to careful regulation of the economic power of guilds, religious authority of the Orthodox Church, and military authority of generals. The emperor maintained ultimate authority by preventing any single institution from gaining enough power to operate independently. In medieval Japan, the Tokugawa shogunate, 1603 to 1868, implemented one of history's most sophisticated control systems. The Sankin Keitai, alternate attendance, system required daimyo, feudal lords, to maintain residences in Edo, Tokyo, and spend alternate years there. This system served multiple functions: it depleted the resources of potential rivals through required travel and maintenance of multiple residences, kept potential troublemakers under observation, and essentially created a hostage system, as daimyo families remained in Edo even when the lords returned to their domains. True power, Cao Guiwei told his apprentice, is exercised through systems that control behavior without appearing coercive. The most sophisticated leadership systems throughout history shared this quality. They functioned not through constant displays of force but through architectural, social, economic, and psychological structures that channel behavior in desired directions. When Charlemagne was crowned Holy Roman Emperor in 800 CE, he understood the power of cultural revival as a leadership tool. His Carolingian Renaissance standardized scholarship, reformed education, and preserved classical knowledge, not solely for intellectual purposes, but because cultural uniformity facilitated governance. Standardized script made administration more efficient, educational reform created a literate class loyal to imperial interests, religious standardization reinforced political authority. The lesson resonates today. Leaders who shape the cultural context in which decisions occur exert influence far beyond direct commands. By establishing the parameters within which people think and act, they exercise power that is simultaneously more subtle and more profound than explicit authority. In Song Dynasty China, 960-1279, imperial officials developed civil service examinations to a new level of sophistication. While ostensibly meritocratic, allowing talented individuals from modest backgrounds to attain high office, this system also ensured loyalty. Officials owed their position to the system itself rather than to family connections or local power bases, creating a bureaucracy dependent on imperial favor. This insight, that dependencies create reliability, informed leadership strategies across civilizations. The Ottoman Empire's devshirme system, which recruited Christian boys from the Balkans for government service and the elite Janissary Corps, created officials and soldiers with no local power base who depended entirely on the Sultan's favor. The loyal servant, Cao Guiwei noted, is one who has nowhere else to turn. Military strategies developed by ancient leaders continue to influence modern conflict and competition. Genghis Khan's approach to warfare in the 13th century emphasized mobility, flexibility, and psychological operations. Before battles, the Mongols would spread rumors about their ferocity and numbers, magnifying fear among opponents. They would offer generous terms for surrender but inflict brutal punishment on those who resisted, creating powerful incentives for cities to yield without fighting. This approach minimized Mongol casualties while maximizing territorial gains. The technique of creating overwhelming psychological pressure to achieve objectives without direct confrontation remains central to military and business strategy today, appearing in everything from corporate takeovers to international diplomacy. When Emperor Ashoka ruled the Mauryan Empire in India, 268 to 232 BCE, he developed governance innovations that still resonate. After the bloody Kalinga War, which reportedly claimed over 100,000 lives, Ashoka converted to Buddhism and implemented a governance philosophy based on Dhamma, righteousness. He erected pillars and rock edicts throughout his realm communicating his ethical principles, created welfare systems including hospitals and rest houses, and appointed special officials, Dhamma Mahamatas, to promote welfare and religious tolerance. What made Ashoka's approach sophisticated was not merely its ethical content but its practical effect. By positioning himself as the source and guardian of moral principles, he created a governance system that operated through internalized values rather than external force. Citizens who internalized imperial values effectively policed themselves and others, extending state power through cultural mechanisms. The greatest triumph of leadership, Cao Guiwei explained, is to have the people believe they govern themselves while acting according to your design. This insight informed governance across civilizations and epochs. The Venetian Republic, 697-1797, developed complex electoral procedures for selecting the Doge, chief magistrate, that appeared democratic but actually consolidated aristocratic power. The elaborate system involving multiple rounds of voting, selection by lot, and confirmation procedures created the impression of broad participation while ensuring results acceptable to the ruling oligarchy. The concept that perception often matters more than reality was well understood by Queen Elizabeth I of England, ruled 1558 to 1603, who carefully crafted her public image through portraits, public appearances, and rhetoric. Her famous Tilbury speech before the expected Spanish invasion in 1588, where she declared, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king," represents masterful understanding of symbolic leadership. By acknowledging and then dismissing potential weaknesses, she transformed them into strengths. This careful image management extended to her self-presentation as the Virgin Queen, married to her nation, a public identity that resolved the political problem of a female monarch in a patriarchal society while avoiding the complications of sharing power with a husband. The Roman Emperor Hadrian, ruled 117 to 138 CE, demonstrated the leadership principle that personal presence matters. Unlike predecessors who ruled largely from Rome, Hadrian spent more than half his reign traveling throughout the empire. These journeys were not merely ceremonial but allowed him to inspect military installations, evaluate local governance, initiate building projects, and connect directly with provincial elites. This practice reduced the psychological distance between center and periphery, reinforcing imperial authority through personal contact. "The emperor seen is the emperor believed," Cao Guowei observed. Distance breeds both mystery and doubt. In the Inca Empire, 1438 to 1533, rulers developed sophisticated methods for maintaining control over vast territories without written language. The quipu, a recording system using knotted cords, allowed for accurate administrative record keeping. More importantly, the Incas implemented institutional practices that reinforced authority: the mita, a labor tax system, reciprocal gift exchanges that created obligations, and systematic resettlement of potentially troublesome populations to prevent regional power centers from emerging. These techniques ensured that while local administrators had necessary authority to govern effectively, their power remained thoroughly subordinate to the central imperial structure. In the final years of the Tang dynasty, as Cao Guowei witnessed the empire's gradual decline, he compiled his observations into a treatise titled The Invisible Threads of Rule. The manuscript was not intended for public distribution but as guidance for future advisors. In it, he articulated principles that he had observed across multiple dynasties and empires. The wisest governance is that which is least perceived as governance. Citizens should believe they act of their own will while fulfilling the designs of the state. Tax collection should appear as civic duty, military service as patriotic honor, obedience to law as moral virtue. When force must be used, it should be decisive, swift, and rare, remembered long but witnessed briefly. These insights were not unique to China but represent universal principles rediscovered by effective leadership throughout history. Queen Catherine de' Medici of France, 1519 to 1589, operating in the turbulent period of the French Wars of Religion, maintained power through intelligence networks, strategic marriages, and careful balancing of factions. Her methodology, creating dependency relationships, gathering information, and positioning herself as the indispensable center of power networks, reflected the same fundamental understanding of power dynamics that Cao Guowei had articulated. The most sophisticated leadership systems recognized that hard power, military and economic force, was necessary but insufficient. Soft power, cultural influence, ideological alignment, and perception management extended authority more efficiently and with less resistance. The Abbasid Caliphate during its Golden Age, 750-1258 CE, demonstrated this principle. While maintaining formidable military capabilities, caliphs like Harun al-Rashid, ruled 786 to 809, gained legitimacy and extended influence through patronage of arts, sciences, and scholarship. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad became a center for translation, research, and intellectual advancement, contributing to the perception of the caliphate as a civilizational leader rather than merely a military power. This technique, associating leadership with cultural and intellectual flourishing, creates forms of authority that outlast military supremacy. The cultural prestige of ancient Athens continues to influence global thinking millennia after its political power faded. True legacy, Cao Guowei noted, resides not in conquered territories but in conquered minds. Today, these ancient insights into leadership and power dynamics remain relevant, though their application has evolved. Modern leaders still employ the core techniques: institutional balancing, strategic information management, perception manipulation, dependency creation, and system design that shapes behavior while preserving the illusion of autonomy. Corporate executives create organizational structures that align employee self-interest with company objectives. Politicians develop messaging that frames policy preferences as moral imperatives. Nations project power through cultural exports and educational influence alongside military capability. What Cao Guowei and his counterparts across civilizations understood, what they did not want broadly known, was that the most effective governance systems operate largely below conscious awareness. They function not through constant coercion but by shaping the architecture of choice and perception within which people operate. The ancient leadership secrets were not primarily about how to issue commands but how to create systems where commands become largely unnecessary, where the desired behavior emerges from the designed environment rather than direct instruction. This understanding remains the ultimate leadership insight, that power maintained through force alone is brittle, while power embedded in systems, cultures, and perceptions is resilient. The most effective leaders throughout history created governance approaches that worked with human psychology rather than against it, channeling natural tendencies toward desired outcomes. As we navigate our own complex world of organizational leadership, political governance, and international relations, these ancient insights offer both guidance and caution. They remind us to look beyond explicit authority to the systems that shape behavior, beyond official narratives to underlying power dynamics, beyond formal leadership to the advisors and structures that inform decisions. The ancient secrets of royal advisors reveal that leadership is rarely about what is most visible. It operates in the spaces between formal institutions, in the psychological landscapes of populations, in the design systems that channel behavior, and in the cultural frameworks that define what seems natural, inevitable, and right. Understanding these dynamics allows us not only to lead more effectively but to recognize when we ourselves are being led, often in directions we have not consciously chosen, through methods we have not explicitly approved, toward ends we might not independently select. This awareness represents the ultimate leadership wisdom, the capacity to see the invisible threads that connect power to action, authority to outcome, and design to behavior.